I think we have a pretty good understanding to this point of what the struggle looks like for a husband who is wrestling with the addictive process for most of his life. But for a wife, there is a significant journey that she has been on up until the point of discovery of her husband's behaviors.
There's just this like implicit trust, security, attachment. It's all organized and good. And then this discovery happens. And it's like someone takes those filing cabinets and throws them all over the ground. And then you're left to try to make sense of it. Discovery or disclosure is always shocking, right? I think you go through a wedding day and there's not a moment walking down the aisle that you really picture yourself going through betrayal and discovery and disclosure, being a part of that story as you exchange vows.
Welcome to the 423 podcast with 423 Communities, where we explore the intersection of faith, recovery, and restoration, equipping you to move from shame and addiction towards life in Christ.
Welcome back, everybody, to the 423 podcast. We have a special guest today. We have Rachel Warneking in the studio with us today. I get to be your host today, Joel Warneking here, Director for 423 Communities. Rachel, it is an honor to have you in the studio.
You. It's been a while since we've gone to talk.
I know, like a few minutes. It's great.
It's perfect.
If you don't know, Rachel is my wife, and we get to run 423 Communities together. Rachel runs our program for wives who have been hurt and wounded because of their husband's problematic sexual addictions or behaviors, as a part of the larger network of 423. And so 423 has the opportunity to help men, women, spouses, youth, family, teens, all trying to recover from the problematic behaviors that we have found ourselves in. For this season, this whole season one has really been laying out the journey that we are on in recovery. And so for the previous 8 or 9 episodes to this point, we've been really unpacking, like, what does it look like for someone who is going through the recovery journey? And we've mainly been focusing our conversations on from the addict's lens, or from the problematic behavior lens for the struggler. But it's something that I address in every single intake call for someone into our program, especially for the men, is that our recovery as husbands, if you are married, is only 50% of the recovery process. That if you are married, there is another part, there is a significant component to your recovery, and that is the recovery of your spouse, and that is the recovery of the marriage relationship. And so kind of as we wrap up season 1 on this race, it was so important, I feel like, to bring in you to really give us a perspective and an overview of, I think we have a pretty good understanding to this point of what the struggle looks like for a husband who is wrestling with the addictive process for most of his life. But for a wife, there is a significant journey that she has been on up until the point of discovery of her husband's behaviors. And so I would love to just have a conversation, right? We don't have to have this well laid out layout of what we're going to talk about, but from your perspective as a wife of a very great husband, I must say, what was the journey like for you, even before meeting me, and kind of setting the stage for your journey through betrayal healing?
Yeah, that's a small question for sure.
Small question.
Man, well, I have to say this season has been so good to hear you and Ben break down the journey, because I think that's helpful for wives too, to try to make sense of, okay, what is normal, what is going on here, what are some of the layers, and then where does God meet us in that? So that is important, but there is always that element too of, okay, but there's so many nuances for the wife story. And so I'm honored to share. It's always kind of that, man, if I only speak to my journey, Maybe it's so different from what others have experienced. I want to try to like cover everything that I've heard in the thousands of phone calls I've had, or the different intakes or different coachings.
Well, I think as a disclaimer, this will just be a overview.
Yes.
I would love to get you for a whole season of unpacking the betrayed partner's experience in very nuanced details. But for this purpose, we'll just kind of go through, a very good overview of that process.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, discovery or disclosure is always shocking, right? I think it's just crazy to think all of these wives, right? You go through a wedding day and there's not a moment walking down the aisle that you really picture yourself going through betrayal and discovery and disclosure, being a part of that story as you exchange vows. And so just the shock of it. I think for me, my experience, we were so young, newlyweds, I guess almost 2 years in, or a little bit more than 2 years. For me, it was so disorienting because that wasn't anything I saw coming. It was so shocking. And so it's interesting. I just got off of a coaching call this morning, and she's talking about, her husband's experiencing this freedom for the first time. He's walking in disclosure. There's just this newness of life that he's experiencing. And she is like, what is going on? Trying to make sense of the story that she did not see coming.
When I think of like when we were dating and even the deep desire that I had to be this perfect husband and this fiance, like I had dreams and desires to be that, but I was incapable of doing that. But so much of our conversations were centered around this idealistic life as this Christian couple. And I did my best to hide all of my faults and failures so that when, we entered into marriage, like your expectation of what I was supposed to be was probably so much different than, if you pulled the veil back, than what was actually occurring in that time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And there is such a natural thing, right, when disclosure happens, that he's had a long time to potentially process what he's partook in, right? It's this, okay, either he's bringing her the disclosure or there's an element of discovery. He knows what he's participated in. Now for the wife, right, it's like your body, brain, I mean, everything is like catching up to this newfound reality that you're living in. And for me, we had walked in those ideals of everything that we wanted it to be. And now this new reality, that there is another side to this story. And trying to pull that apart and be like, okay, where are we in terms of like, how severe is this? What are the consequences of this going to be? What will relationship look like tomorrow? What will relationship look like in 5-10 years? I mean, there's just something about it. If I could go back for, my 22-year-old self when everything was happening, there was that element of a desire, and I didn't have words for it at the time, right? Safety and stability. And I think that that's really the first place we have to start when we found ourselves in the story that we did not see coming, we did not wish for. We would do anything to make sure that we didn't have to go through such a heartbreaking story and situation. Now, a lot of times, right? Different people can have different reactions. It was interesting to experience it, not having any vocabulary for what was the right way to do recovery. Not a lot of good mentors in place, not a lot of money for therapeutic support. That's part of our stories.
Zero.
We lost just everything. And so that need for safety and stability as like the primary foundation, I feel is so important. That was something that was not present for us. And now that I know what I know, I get the fact that that has to be primary before you can go anywhere else in the journey.
And I'd love to hear you unpack a little bit, because I as a husband and as a man,
Yeah.
and I think you started touching on that I knew what my disclosure carried.
Yeah.
There was no pulling of the rug. It was more of just like lifting of the rug and seeing all the dirt that had been swept under the rug. But for your reality, like when you first came upon that disclosure moment, it wasn't just like, oh, here's all these things that I know and now they're in the light, and that's shocking enough for the husband. But for you, it was like a complete rewrite of your reality. And I think that's important for us to hear, is why does it create such a need for safety and stability? And I think the answer is because of the immense amount of confusion and danger and hypervigilance that you experience when all of a sudden this perfect, quote unquote, if you can't see my hands, perfect husband that you think you're marrying suddenly reveals a complete alternative lifestyle that you knew nothing about. And I think that really sets the stage for your more extreme need for safety and stability. And I think for some of our younger men in groups, they're like, why did this affect my wife so much? And so maybe you can kind of speak to that, that perceived reality versus what actually came to light, and why that disparity creates such a void and need for that safety and stability.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so hard to pick what elements of our story I want to go into, but and we're going to do a longer form, breaking up our story, and I'm so excited for that because there's so much to say. But what comes to mind first is Dr. Jake Porter has this imagery that he's used. I don't know if he came up with it, but this imagery of a filing cabinet, right? Like before disclosure, you're walking around in marriage and you're, those files are perfectly organized. You've made sense of it. You've been like, okay, this is the person I'm going to marry. This is what our life is going to look like. There's just this implicit trust, security, attachment. It's all organized and good. And then this discovery happens, and it's like someone takes those filing cabinets and throws them all over the ground, and then you're left to try to make sense of it. You're looking at your spouse and saying, okay, when you told me that, was that true? When we walked down the aisle, what was going on?
Every experience comes into that re-looking at it of, was that true? It doesn't matter what the experience was, everything
totally
needs to be reevaluated.
You are struggling potentially with insecurity, self-image, lack of trust in yourself. You've have this broken attachment with someone that you just wanted to admire and look up to and trust fully, and now that feels severed. Maybe you have children and you're like, okay, what's the safety component here? Is there areas that I need to know to figure out, okay, can we remain in this situation or in a home together, or just so many different things.
Or even the hypervigilance of what else has not yet been shared. For our story, it wasn't me coming to you with a disclosure, it was me being found out in my disclosure. So you're like, man, that's what you got caught with. What else is behind? So there's this also this forecasting and hypervigilance of what's behind the veil.
When did this begin? How deep are the roots? And so that filing cabinet, right, is such a great image to what's going on in her brain and body. And as she's waking up, right, every day and moving forward in relationship, I think a lot of guys are just like, hey, I told you, stop needing to rehearse what happened. But that is really her body, right? And that was my body, and I didn't have words for it, of trying to make sense of what had happened. Because our bodies are so beautiful, right? They are so perfectly designed by God to be able to make sense of our stories. And so part of making sense of our stories are kind of rehearsing, okay, we went through this, and now we went through this, and trying to make sense. Now, right, that can come across as hypervigilance. Sometimes we can dissociate. This can lead to like PTSD like symptoms. There's so many different reactions that our brains and bodies can have to this sort of trauma, attachment rupture. But I think where I found myself mostly was just needing a presence, whether that be you or another person, or even just with the Lord, of like, what has happened and how do I make sense of it? Yeah. If I would have had someone who was like regulated and could have sat with me and slowly gone through those files together and helped with the reorganization of that would have been huge. And so I even think for guys, right, that are listening to this and they're walking with their wives and they feel like, man, every night we're having a conversation of kind of the worst things I've ever done, and I'm so annoyed, I'm so tired. You are doing her such an important service by working through those files with her, reorganizing, showing, hey, we're going to build a new foundation, but yes, we have to be able to limit, we have to be able to acknowledge the pain, the lack of trust. All of those things will further her healing, and it will help your relationship, the coupleship, heal.
Yeah, and I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
But most men who are struggling with the addiction side, like one of the things we teach is just, man, your inability to process through pain. That's why we're in this place in the first place. The place is usually those addictive processes are a coping mechanism for discomfort and pain. That's why men are so unable to be empathetic, is because we have become pain adverse. Yes. And so one of the things that we teach with our men is that the reason it's so difficult for us to engage in your healing is that we have to face the deepest pain points in ourselves to be able to even sit in front of you, to be able to look you in the eye and know that this woman that I said these marriage vows to, that I meant dearly and wished to be true, that I just caused you the greatest pain that you've ever experienced. Yeah. That's so difficult for a man who is inept at processing emotions. That's what happens in group, is that men learn how to process. I mean, it's not me. I'm very emotionally adept. No, we've had our moments for sure. But in group, men are learning how to process through emotions to be able to go back home and engage their wives in these conversations towards healing. Yeah. And so just kind of walking you through what is typically like the timeline or the process of what a woman needs as she's going through this phase. Because I think one of the things that I hear most often in coaching or in groups is, man, it's been 2 months since disclosure. My wife's still fresh. I'm like, 2 months? Talking about 20 years. Like what is the timeline of kind of rebuilding that emotional intimacy? And, you know, I know that's going to be so varied for whoever you're talking to. But I think it would be helpful for men to hear what is the process that a woman has to go through. And then maybe for the women that are listening to, that there is hope, that there is a process of finding healing. But kind of what is your experience with that, and what does a woman need as she goes through that process? Yeah,
it is so, every story is so different, right? Yeah. I do think rather than putting a time frame on it, I think just remembering, right? If you're a spouse walking through someone with this, or you are a spouse who's been betrayed, I think the deepest desire is to have a space to be able to lament and grieve. And I think I often with when I'm working with the wives, I'll suggest, hey, if your husband is willing to hear from you, putting on his emotion or his sobriety line something like, hey, be able to hold my wife's grief well. Yeah. How did that look like that past week for you? To be able for her to be able to actually pull that pain apart, have him acknowledge and own it. Yeah, man, I can't tell you how many, and I've had a lot of meetings today, so I'm like pulling back from all my meetings. Sure. But I just had a meeting, and this couple is just having so much growth, so much change. And they're like holding space for each other every single night.
Wow.
And talking about the recovery process and what it looks like and pitfalls and moments to celebrate. And I think that's what wives want more than anything, right? I don't need you to solve the pain. I do need to see some, healthy behaviors and you're moving forward on the recovery process. But every single wife I talk to, they are deeply hurt by the behavior that their husband has participated in.
Yeah.
But what they're more hurt by is the continual lies and the deception and the minimizing of behavior. And so for them, and I know it's so hard because they're having to confront so much of themselves, right? And we'll be honest, right? 10 years down the road, there are moments where I'm still deeply triggered by our story and what has happened in the past. And that can be really inconvenient for you, right? It is inconvenient.
Well, it's hard for me to remember all the time, right?
It can be inconvenient for me to have to experience and hold those emotions. It can be inconvenient for you to have to process through something that you wish, was just buried and gone. I think, right? And I was talking to someone about this morning. It is that sadness of living in a broken world with a story that has pain. What I would say with that is, how blessed are those that are in a space with their spouse who is there and fighting and bringing them that pain, because it could be totally opposite. They could be gone. They could not be in the room. They could leave the relationship. And so just seeing that as a gift, right? When I bring you my pain to cipher through, it's not out of a place of condemnation or how could you. It's out of a place of desperation to be in relationship with you. But there is an area that we have to work through first to provide a right relationship.
Yeah.
So that's a gift, right? When we reframe it in that way, it's like, okay, they're here. They're bringing me the different parts of them that are triggered, and I get to be a participant in helping build new trust and new foundations along the way after something devastating has happened. And we have to remember that it's devastating, right?
Yeah.
And it's worthwhile to set up a plan where you're like, okay, how can I be empathetic to her emotions? Maybe that's your weekly sobriety mind. Maybe that's someone in your life checking in, not just on you and your own recovery and where you're at, but relationally, where are you and what do you need to hold space for this week?
Yeah.
And maybe that will change from season to season, but there's probably always an area of your life in your recovery that is affecting your wife that, man, I can't think of a more loving question than to come to her and say, hey, like, what area feels still really difficult for you and what do I need to be attentive to? I'd be so thrilled if you would have asked me that the first couple years fresh into recovery.
Yeah. That's great stuff. So just in our last few minutes here, what is some of your advice to maybe a woman who's listening, who doesn't have any care, has discovered this or has known about it, maybe hasn't even had a disclosure, but knows intuitively what's going on behind the scenes in her family? What would you say to her would be the next steps that she needs to do in this process?
Yeah. I think every single phone call I do, one of the first things is, right, I've never told anyone this. And that is not, it's not going to go well for you, right? And I understand. It's sometimes you don't even know the full reality that you're walking through. And it feels like, how do I bring someone else into this? Sometimes there's that feeling of, I want to protect my spouse and from the details or his image, right? So there's so many different things that could be holding you back from care, it is so worthwhile for you to build a support system around that. This could not be you getting these disclosures, you living in this hypervigilance of, okay, I've got to check this email, or I got to make sure this is okay. Am I good? Are we good? That's not going to go well if you guys are alone in that. And I think a lot of wives, you've probably, if you haven't reached out for help yet, you've probably already experienced how detrimental that is to you as a human, right? To be walking through this alone without a good support system. So one, tell someone, reach out for clinical care, reach out for a group process like what we offer at 423 Sisters. Yeah. Someone needs to know your story besides you in isolation, right? And you're worthy of that. This, no matter what has happened, it's so easy to minimize our experience. I should be okay. I should be fine. That was only one time. We don't really get to decide how our bodies respond to the trauma of this. And so there's so many things I want to say, but my biggest encouragement is to don't continue going on alone and thinking that you will be able to make sense of it yourself. I lived in that for way too many years, and the devastating effects that caused me. I wish I could go back for myself and not live in that same isolation.
Yeah. And I think for the husband who's listening, it is our responsibility to care for you. And it is our responsibility to make space for you to heal and to give you the things that you need to find that safety and stability and that reframing of your reality. And no cost is too great for that process to heal. We're in recovery for ourselves because of the circumstances of life and our own decisions that have brought us to this place in our recovery journey. But you didn't ask for this, right? You were a byproduct, a casualty of the chaos that's inside of our story. And so husbands need to make space for that and to be able to be flexible. I'm sure in a future episode too, we can talk about just the needing to be flexible with, hey, you should have boundaries in relationship. And you should have the right to say, hey, I'm on this journey with you, and these are the things that I need as your partner. For you speaking to me as the wife to me, I need these boundaries in place to create that safety and stability and that new reality of what it means for us to be together. Like, that is an okay thing to be a part of that process. And it's going to take years.
Yes.
Right? This, hey, it's been 2 months, it's been 6 months, and my wife still isn't healed. Well, yeah, you've experienced trauma, right? You've experienced damage to your brain and your limbic system and your nervous system and your central core sense of identity and self-worth and who God is and others. That is going to take years of reframing and healing that process. And our job as husbands is to have safe, empathic presence where we're with you in that space, which means that we have to do our own work to become a safe place for you to engage in. And I'm still working on that myself. You don't need to throw any elbows in here. But husbands need to be able to do their work to be able to help their wives heal. So that we as a family unit can heal together because we are one. Right? We're not on our own individual journeys.
It's so important. I mean, especially for the young moms, there's just so many things that you can do to care for them. And part of being that peaceful presence to break apart the different emotions or things that are coming up for them is the biggest gift you could give. So however you need to figure out how to be kind and how to be able to hold their emotions is a worthwhile process. So
Can you just give our listeners just a breakdown, a brief overview of 423 Sisters, how we as 423 communities walk alongside wives and families in this space?
I always refer to Sisters as just kind of a betrayal trauma 101. So it is best practices that we know in the clinical world in like group processing work. A lot of people, right? It's wild to see the different people that come into the program. Some have gone through this. They've checked out every book. They've read all these books. They have the language around recovery. Other people will go through this and they're like, I'll talk to them and they'll not know what a CSAT is. They won't know what a full disclosure is. There's so many different tools for them to utilize that they have no idea about. Yeah. And so what we like to do, right, because we're getting a lot of these men into the program, the worst thing is to help the men, and then their wives are home having all these devastating effects of trauma, and they have no idea of what programs are out there to help them, what clinical resources are out there to help them. If they're like stuck deep into PTSD and they don't know what EMDR is, like we want to give them that understanding. And so that is one component to it, right? This resource side. Because what I would hate is 2 years down the road, she's still really, really stuck. He's gained all of this health and freedom and she still doesn't know what her options are for care. Then the other side of it is this relational side where you can say all you need to say in a non-biased presence of women. They're not gonna self-protect and be like, hey, that's not how I said it, or you were reading into that wrong. Like sometimes can happen in the relationship, right? There can be that defensiveness of that person's experience. So that component is always our highest goal, right? We want you to be able to
community.
Yes, we want you to be able to process through your story. You are worthy of tying together the different components that you have experienced in relationship, whether it's been 6 months or 60 years, to feel known and seen inside your story in a safe group of women. Is incredibly healing and something that you have to experience. Moving out of that isolation is so important.
That's great.
And I could say so much more about sisters, but
you will at some point. We'll get you back in here and have you do a full session. And I think we're going to unpack our story together. In very, very long form. I think a few hours of time together, really going through every nuanced detail to give people just an inside look at what it looks like to recover as a couple. And to grow together in those spaces. So if you would like more info, you can go to 423communities.org. And there's our program information for men, women, if you're also wrestling with this, which there's a high population of women who are struggling with unwanted sexual behaviors. And there's groups for you, as well as our 423 Sisters program, where you can get connected to care or find resources available for you in your community. We would love to walk with you in that safe community, so that we all together can find hope, healing, and restoration. Thanks for being here, bud.
Thank you. I love you.
Love you.
Thanks for listening. If you want to learn more about 423 Communities or get connected with us, go to 423communities.org and follow us at the links in the show notes or the description below.